doing the quickest handover ever, because we want to run on time. Andy is going to start. Andrew David Barker, filmmaker, author of Bricks and Mortar Films.
Thank you. Play the clip.
What is that? I don't know.
So, other worlds, that's what stories are to me, stepping into another world. Whether I'm writing a novel, a short story, a short film, or a feature film, it's all story. They just all have different shades. That film was called Shining Tor. It was made on nothing but sheer will and what I term as naive ambition in the summer of 2018. I didn't apply for funding. I didn't wait for anyone's permission, and perhaps most importantly, I didn't think about it for too long. I just went and did it. I have a term for this: outrun the doubt. You outrun the doubt. You get it done before you start talking yourself out of it, because that demon doubt can really get its hooks into you. Next slide, please. At the time, I was working in the art department on the BBC drama Doctors. It was there I met other people filled with similar ambitions to me, similar drives, and they jumped on board this short for the sheer adventure. You see, the trick is to find those people who just want to go and do it, and you help one another along. That's a very important factor in all this. Find your people. Laura Rollins and Ashley Rice agreed to star in the film. They were in Doctors at the time. And we ran up to Clent Hills after a long day's filming, and Laura ended up winning an award for Best Actress at a film festival, as did my DOP and editor, Mick Walker, won for his brilliant effects. And it played all over the world, including Cannes. But how did I get to this point? I was born to a working-class family in Derby in 1975. And growing up in the 80s, I was very much part of the Spielberg and Lucas generation. They fired my imagination from a very young age, and I was drawn to genre unapologetically. And that's what I wanted to watch, and that's what I wanted to make. I had a pretty poor education and left school in 1991 with a head full of ideas and little clue as how to express them. And for a long time, my life was building sites and factories, which I don't regret now because it's given me a good grounding, I think, and a good sense of character. For a long time, that was my life, but I was always working towards some kind of creative outlet, and I went down a lot of dead ends. But I realized that that's part of the process now. You have to fail in order to move forward. Next slide, please. So I'm going to skip over a lot of my timeline because there was a lot of wayward years, a lot of failed and unfinished projects. But in 2009, at the age of 34, I directed my first feature film, A Reckoning. Now, I had a method here which has served me well. I basically found a location and wrote to order. So I found an old RAF base just outside of Nottingham, and it was a whole village yet left to rack and ruin. It was a whole film set. So I inquired, figured I might be able to get it, and then just wrote a story that fit that location. And as I'm a fan of the genre, I made a post-apocalyptic drama, horror, sci-fi. I don't know, I threw everything at the wall. Next slide, please. And we basically went out there and made it again on sheer will. It starred Leslie Simpson, who was in Dog Soldiers and Doomsday and other Neil Marshall films, and Axel Karelin, who's now a very big director in Hollywood, TV. And we shot it in a January. We got it done in 2 weeks. It was freezing. There was no running water. The place was, I mean, it's a good job we didn't have any health and safety on that film whatsoever. But we managed to get away with it, and no one was hurt. Next slide, please. And it snowed in the middle of filming, which looked fantastic on the film, but played havoc with our equipment. And man, it was cold. I've got to stop making films in January. The aftermath of that film is a big, long story, which I won't go into here, but it kind of took me out of the game for a long time. It was the usual low-budget story of a simple falling out, I guess. And it ended up in legal limbo for a long time, but it is now out. It's on Amazon Prime. If you want to watch a complete exercise in guerrilla filmmaking, it's there for all to see. It's a weird one. Enjoy. Next slide, please. After that, I started writing novels. I moved down here to Leamington from Derby and started writing novels. And the great thing about novels is there's no budgetary constraints. It's just you in a room. I don't have to worry about locations or crew or actors. I can do anything I want on the page. And these books were quite well received. I wrote The Electric, which was coming from my generation. It was set in the 80s about a group of kids who stumble across a cinema that shows movies made by ghosts. So it's a very Stephen King, Ray Bradbury type vibe to it. Next slide, please. That was followed closely by Dead Leaves, which was sort of a grittier book, quite autobiographical. Again, kids in the 80s, films, but very much a very working class novel about that limbo between childhood and adulthood. Next slide, please. And I just kept writing books. From there, I wrote a children's novel called The Winter Man and a horror novel called Society Place. Next slide, please. But the pull to make films was always there. And when I started working at Doctors and again found these like-minded people, it really fired my imagination to get making films again. So I tried to think of the simplest thing I could. Next slide, please. And the simplest thing I could think of was two old blokes in a pub. And I shot it in a day. It was very simple, and it spoke a little bit about working class life, but it was really an exercise in getting something done. And quickly on the heels of that, I made Shining Tour, which I've already mentioned. Next slide, please. Then at the beginning of 2002, my friend and I, Ash Price, who's a like-minded individual, set up Bricks and Mortar Films, both sons of bricklayers. So it seemed to speak to that and also speak to a sort of our DIY ethos. Next slide, please. And the whole thing was to make films as simply as possible, just using cast and crew that we knew we could get and keep it all contained. So we didn't have to ask anyone for help. We could just go and make. This one, How Would You Like to Pay, was shot on the roof of my extension one cold January night. I've got to stop making films in January. It's freezing. Our next film I make is going to be in July. I say that now. So next slide, please. So this was quite well received, but again, it was an exercise in just getting something done. Every step has been just me trying to learn as I go along, and steadily trying to get bigger and bigger. Next slide, please. And from here, I started writing for other people as well, other directors. I've written short films, and now I'm writing feature films for other people as well, which is a really interesting process, and I really like being a writer for hire. But as long as I'm kind of doing my own thing as well, I need that balance. Next slide, please. So from there, Ash made a boxing drama called Glory Days, which I helped produce, and I made Here Lies, which is still in post-production. We're just doing the sound now, and again, it was just trying to finding a location I knew I could get, and getting as many people as I could, talking as many people as I could into doing it with me. I got the help of Coventry Uni and their film department. Sana Wicks over there helped produce the film. And I also went back to doctors and asked Ian Midlane, who's still a predominant actor on the show, and I sort of rolled the dice. It's one of those, if you don't ask, you don't get. So I didn't think he'd do it, but I sent him it. He responded to it and came down for the day and gave us a great performance. And so from that, I'm now in this position where I can get that film out this year and hopefully build to, the next stage, which is hopefully a bigger production. Because that's essentially me. But in short, I want to say that whatever it is you want to do, you don't wait for anyone's permission. Just go and make and outrun the doubt. Thank you.
That's water, by the way, not gin. There you go, great. Okay, thank you. Hi, everyone. My name's Lucy Tomlins, and I'm an artist, cultural producer, and also the director of a company called Pangaea Sculptors Centre. We're a not-for-profit, and we have a base in Coventry at the Daimler Powerhouse and also in Hackney. And I'm one of the founding directors, and Pangaea really is a platform supporting contemporary sculptors and fostering technical excellence. As I said, we're a not-for-profit, and in 2 weeks we celebrate our 10th birthday. And we promote and enrich wider public engagement with sculpture through education, critical and cultural programming. We also provide technical fabrication and installation services, including commissioning and project management of public artworks. And the profits from these more commercial strands of activity are reinvested to support our community of artists and cultural programme. Myself, I graduated from the Royal College of Art, the Sculpture MA in 2012. And since then, I've evolved a hybrid practice, which involves creating my own artworks in my studio, alongside producing and curating in collaboration with other artists, designers, architects, and other creative professionals. And this sees me toggle between large-scale collaboration and working solo, blending these different strands of activity and understanding them all really as part of an enriching contemporary artistic practice. And not only enriching, but sustainable, which I think is really important when we're thinking about creativity and staying in the game against the odds. And I live in Leamington, and my studio is over in Hackney. Next slide, please. So the programme that I'm going to talk to you about today, Hand Earth Gesture Return, a sustainably focused public art programme for Coventry and Warwickshire. It involved a year of research and development, followed by a year of public programming. And Pangaea invited 5 artists from the UK and India, Dolon Kundu, Amy and Oliver Thomas Irvine, Rachel Champion and Jim Woodall, to come together for the first time to collaborate on a site and context-specific artwork for Coventry Canal Basin. And it was co-produced and co-curated by myself alongside Kolkata-based Nandita Pal Chowdhury, who's an expert in traditional Indian heritage and crafts. Next slide, please. From summer 2020 to June 2021, the artists and curatorial team embarked on a period of embedded research, practical workshops, collaborative design, and community consultation, which took us from Kolkata to Coventry. And we engaged in particular communities in and around the Coventry Canal Basin, from Fowes Hill, Holbrook and Radford. And these areas, if you don't know them, are very multicultural with a big South Asian community. Next slide. So Hand Earth Gesture Return really was an experiment or a pilot in thinking more sustainably about temporary public art. Too often, temporary works for festival formats involve a lot of material wastage, as their afterlife isn't really built into their development from the outset. And we were in particular thinking about City of Culture and other festivals that engage with the temporary as well as more permanent public cultural interventions. Next slide. We took inspiration from indigenous philosophy and vernacular infrastructure in an attempt to generate a more sustainable and resilient production and creative approach. If we began a project by prioritizing sustainable materials, in this instance, the local growing of thatching straw and sourcing of clay, how could this shift to a more sustainable material engagement also innovate new creative outcomes and cultural experiences, and through this, attract new audiences to contemporary art? Our 5 artists were invited to work with the people of Coventry and Warwickshire to develop and create this temporary public sculpture. It was inspired by the use of earth, water, and straw from around the world, from British cob and thatching, via Egyptian mud brick, Latin American kincha, African rammed earth, and specifically Kolkata's Durga Puja Hindu festival. Next slide, please. So this approach to public art really turned the creation and erosion process into a series of performative events that the public could witness or participate in over the course of the year. From the growing and harvesting of a field of Attley spring wheat in Hatton, harvested traditionally with scythes and old reaper binder, turning the grain into flour, turning the flour into bread, and using the long stem straw for the installation, to the transportation of the straw harvest by barge from Hatton Locks to Coventry. Next slide, please. To processing the processing of clay into sculptural objects. So there were opportunities for people, the public, to handle materials, get making, and participate in the full material life cycle and transformation process. And in this way, we hoped to create a greater connection to and understanding of our material environment and our culture, embedding ecology, art, and sustainability into people's experience of art and their city. So a few points of context which may seed later discussion. Number one, this was an international collaboration, and it was born out of lockdown and had to evolve alongside the uncertainty of our times. Number two, we had international collaborators that did not speak each other's verbal language. 3, it sought to positively engage with and harness some of the key challenges of our time, notably the climate emergency. Number 4, it had to be financed in a world of government cuts to arts provisions and financial insecurity for the public writ large. Number 5, 3 of our 5 collaborating artists had new babies at the end of the research and development phase of the project. How, as an organisation, could Pangaea ensure we supported their ongoing participation in the project and ensure that they didn't feel excluded or unable to continue? Next slide, please, and if you can play the film. Canal Basin was transformed into a live, site-specific public art installation. For the duration of the installation, the Canal Basin and all objects, people, and activities were understood as a giant, evolving sculptural composition. The Canal Basin became a stage created by scaffold straw drying racks, clay-smeared billboard posters, raw construction materials, paraphernalia, and sculptural forms in stages of evolution. The act of creation itself was the art, artists and public intertwining, hands and feet moving to a shared rhythm, bodies and surfaces coated with clay, the sounds of production, responding to the beat of drums, connecting us back to the earth. Throughout the week, an open architectural structure, some called it a gate, some called it a dwelling space, was created from clay and straw by our lead artists, the Pangaea production team, Coventry University volunteers, city hosts, and members of the public. Working alongside our artists, the public could add to the installation and become part of this unique experience, the first of its kind in Coventry and Warwickshire. The structure was then lime washed with indigo and adorned with thousands of clay flowers. These were made with members of the community over the preceding 3 months, and the contributors included members of groups from the GMP Gurdwara, Broad Street Community Hall, Imagineers Monday Night Makers, Life Path Trust, Fose Hill Creates, Crisis, 150 pupils from across all of the creative subjects at Coventry College, and many, many more. And though inspired by culturally specific clay and straw heritage techniques from around the world, the artists specifically chose not to replicate any, and this allowed the artwork to resonate more broadly. The artists taught an adapted range of craft skills from around the world, from mixing clay into cob with feet to straw binding. They explored the relationship with these different cultural references that the public participants and audience members had. And we had visitors who had cultural heritage from as near and as far as Coventry, Eritrea, India and Afghanistan, all describing how it reminded them of buildings and dwelling spaces from home. On the last day, a water erosion ritual was performed involving members of the public, our visual artists and local collaborating musicians. The musicians had been on the journey with us for the last year, and these were Mahendra Patel, Luke Weaver, Parmjeet Bamra and his sons, all based in Coventry. And this marked the beginning of the erosion process, the sealing of the structure, and the return of the sculpture to the earth. As water rained down, the thousands of clay flowers made by hundreds of participants from the local community over the last few months melded together and dissolved as the indigo and lime surface eroded. And an estimated 1,000 people contributed to the production of this ambitious public artwork across its many phases over the course of the year. And production. So this isn't just the audience, this is people that physically were involved in the making of this work, from harvesting with scythes to processing clay, making flowers. They actively, physically got involved with building this with us. Sustainability and environmental consciousness at its core, it was built in from the outset that the materials used once eroded would be reused, recycled, or returned to the earth. After the water rained down, washing the structure away, or partially washing the structure away, in 40-degree heat, there was still the task of moving 2 tons of damp clay, straw, and paraphernalia onto the final chapter of the story, its recycling and return to the earth. And a number of the architectural fragments were temporarily installed at the Peace Orchard in Cowden Hall Park in Coventry, where the erosion process continued, and other materials started a new life cycle, having been donated to local allotments and community groups, including here in Leamington. Okay. Next slide, please. Oh, okay. They're not the final slides, but I'm pretty much at the end, so let's not worry too much about it. All I really want to say is that I hope you found that this example an interesting one, really, of creativity against the odds in a public artwork context, and also that it demonstrates how, with thought and consideration and care, some of the challenges and issues we're currently facing can be harnessed to innovate new creative outcomes and experiences, reconnecting us to the material world around us and each other. Thank you.
Right, thanks Lucy and Andy, amazing stuff. Okay, Ben Talks, humble, eh? This is the name of my blog. Hopefully you can see what I'm doing there, so TED Talks, ideas worth sharing. You never hear Ted talking, do you? Who is Ted anyway? My wife says, your blog, it's always about you. Who wants to hear about you and your ideas? But it's hard to be told that as an artist, you are the brand. Art that makes you think. Artists hate talking about brands, especially when it's you. Putting yourself out there doesn't come easy, at least not for me. In the context of our theme, creativity against the odds, it's a barrier. So let's sort of check them off as we go through. We artists, we like the creative bit, not so much the selling bit. So my brand, Art That Makes You Think, and you can sign up to my blog here. It's not Saturday Night Fever, that's my next slide move, by the way. So the logo is a firebrand, so my apparel is unbranded. So it's either confusing or it's ironic. You be the judge. So my medium is irony. My art starts with an idea, a truth if you like, rather than starting with beauty. So I take something iconic you might recognize, and then I subvert it to mean something else. If you're familiar with the Pink Floyd album cover, you might know this one. This is a piece of my art, which is a word cloud piece, called Man on Fire. The creative and the commuter, based on my brother and me. The artist, inhale, oh, okay. We've gone on one extra, could you go back, please? Thank you very much. So you can see the word cloud here. Right, it's got the artist on the right and the commuter on the left. So inhale, exhale, repeat, idle, drift, dream for the artist on fire. The company man, inhale, exhale, repeat, obey, consume, repeat. We need both, I think. The artist needs someone to work alongside them and promote their work. The consumer needs the artist to enrich their life with creativity. Back to the Ministry of Silly Talks. So I thought, I'm going to give a talk, but if your opening slide is Ben Talks, then people are going to think you're a dick. So you subvert it, okay? So it's a silly talk. So can we go on to the next slide, please? Thank you. It's a silly talk. Where were we? But it's designed to make you think. So double think, 1984, the Ministry of Love, you know, where the bad stuff happens in Big Brother. But it's the Ministry of Silly Talk. So it's an image stuffed with cultural references and connections, and that's my MO. Connect, celebrate, collaborate. Where there's connection, there's always strength. It's Bear Grylls, always good for a quote. So Spark here, and this is my fourth time, is brilliant. Jonathan, David, and their teams are doing an amazing job, vital job, bringing us all together, putting creativity at the heart of Leamington District, the Creative Quarter, the community. On this panel, in this auditorium, it's full of successful people. I'm not one of them. Now, this is part of a series that I've done to spoof parody Charles Maxey's fantastic book, and here's some of my hand drawings. Here you've got the boy saying, "What do you think success is?" "Not needing to be liked on social media," replies the mole. And I don't want these barriers against the odds to seem like just a series of excuses. I'm prepared to, cut my ear off, but I'd rather not. "What do you want to be when you grow up?" asked them all. "Rich," said the boy. This could be my son. The boy is not an artist, let's say. So they used to say behind every successful man there was a strong woman. At this stage in my life, behind the artist is a wife who works full-time. Right now, a quick run through my story and some of that creativity against the odds. So the time when I felt truly happy in my work, I was a logistician with Médecins Sans Frontières. So I was not a doctor or a nurse, but I enabled the doctors and nurses to work in war zones, in the face of diseases, refugee camps. I worked in places you couldn't go on holiday: Afghanistan, Sierra Leone, Republic of Congo, South Sudan, where my wife was my boss, and recently working in festivals, music festivals in the UK. I would happily have died for MSF, and they're in Ukraine, they're in Syria, they're in Turkey right now, so please donate. When I returned, I worked for the NHS, Oxfam. I found it hard to process what stood for normal life. I found that without a threat to your existence, normal life is an existential threat. My response has been to create art that makes people think, but also laugh. So let's fast forward to the pandemic, because that's where it gets fun, right? It was so quiet, wasn't it? And sunny, too. So in between homeschooling, my kids and I set ourselves the mission to reclaim the streets, which is a bit of a theme going through this. So this involved playing tennis in the street behind and doing some graffiti on my garage door. So this is a video, which hopefully we'll play. So I was struck by the shouty capital letters, polite notice, keep clear. Remember the fear at the time. There was nothing polite about it. It might as well have said police notice. So with hope of forethought, so we're not able to play these videos. Oh, we have, brilliant, thank you. I thought, look, subversion starts at home. So I should go through to another slide. So times got tough. I enjoyed homeschooling, but my dad was diagnosed with cancer, and then soon afterwards, so was I. Actually, I found out about mine on Father's Day in one of those socially distanced moments between, lockdowns. My mum, bless her, drove my dad and I to radiotherapy together, and my dad didn't make it. So after 2 surgeries, 30 radiotherapy sessions, some chemo, nil by mouth, I emerged with the help of my family into the light. Wonderful friends came round with soup, and I'd ask them from my recovery bunker, so what's going on out there? And they'd say, absolutely nothing, Ben. So it seemed like I didn't miss out on much in those months and years. Lockdown was really hard for a lot of people. But I do still feel like Bilbo Baggins once said, it's a dangerous business stepping outside your door. And, it starts to put things into perspective. And here, the mole says, the greatest illusion is that your life should be defined by the work that you do. During this time, I created one of my bestsellers, which is in this Pangolin Classics series of spoof book covers. And this title is called My Self-Isolation, Miseducation. So here we've got 120 days of Sodit. I did this about 120 days in, so that's Marquis de Sade's classic. The Hand-Washing Tale, Homo Sapiens, The Brief Self-Isolation of Humankind. And there's an edition on my stand, which is just through here, if you'd like to have a look. This became really a positive capsule on which buyers could then look back on this period of awfulness and rather laugh than cry. And this brings me to the age-old British weapon of satire, to which I seek to make a humble contribution. When faced with the toxic ideology and practices of Putin and Trump, we can speak truth to power, express our resistance, and refuse a world full of flaws. Over here we've got the Punch magazine. This is the British Lion and the Russian Bear, 1877. And this is one of my book covers I did in 2018 with Mr. Burns there as Putin, The Art of Darkness. And we've also got Make America Fake Again, which might be coming up again. So this is part of my political miseducation. And then Brexit. We love Brexit, right? The Three Brexiteers by Alexander Dumas, Self of Nations, by Adam Smith's Invisible Hand, and Brexistentialism and Dehumanism. Bit of satire there. Look, sorry Brexiteers, we all know you were right now, but we didn't know that at the time, right? Bitter extract, rich in conflict, only 52% guaranteed, so the ultimate Marmite subject, I'm sure they agree. Look, some art may offend, I'll make no apologies, it's a choice, right? My Warwick Open Studios this year is being held at All Saints Church, not far from here, in Leamington, and I may or may not try and show a God Spake series, which is printed on 125-year-old Bible paper. Now, for me, in my opinion, this is how women were whitewashed from the Bible. All hail the feminine divine. Kim Kardashian as a nun there, you can see. Blessed is everyone. The voices of the LGBT community going unheard until now. In my mind, this is ripe for satire. Okay. Any Alice's in tonight? So here are two parody book covers about phone obsession and our going down the digital rabbit hole, sending up this socially acceptable madness that is crossing a busy street whilst browsing on your phone. People, not only Gen Zs, touching the looking glass up to 1,000 times a day, the card-bodied avatars in Wonderland or Dismal Land, sort of more real than their parents around the breakfast table. To sell as an artist, it seems as if we have to have a social media presence, another barrier I'm checking off. But with each touch, the California tech companies, the surveillance capitalists, are harvesting our personal data to concentrate the greatest power base the world has ever seen. Storing up all kinds of problems for the next children's generation. But that's another presentation. That's the meeting down at the docks, right? So I'll get back but that's not a change slide. That was my hand. But here you've got some examples of the beasts, right? We have to feed the beasts. They're pretty big beasts. And if you're going to pull the tiger's tail of some of these beasts, I'm not sure it's a good idea, especially if you want to go ahead and sort of promote your work online afterwards. But again, that's irony and that's on brand. So I'm reinventing myself to one that provides bespoke, ironic services. You can just see it above the office door. I just feel like if you want some subversive art, if you're an organisation that wants to appear subversive, if you've heard a lot about disruptors and disruption in the last decade or so, Airbnb, Uber, Spotify, there are people out there looking for the anti-marketing dollar and more ecologically minded, and I'm here to serve. So before the end, I would like to bring this presentation back to the local, to Leamington's creative quarter, placemaking we heard about this morning, other forms of resistance against the tyranny of huge, faceless organisations. I'm both frustrated and horrified by marketing and advertising. The things you own start owning you, for example. Other T-shirts are available at the stall. Yeah, if capitalism is our most widespread religion, then the Nike swoosh, so I'm pointing up at the board now, there, is the equivalent of the St. Christopher's that people wear around their neck to show that we're believers. When did it become okay to seize public space and privatise it for commercial benefit? I was in Paris over the Christmas period, and I noticed this enormous advert for Samsung phones. This is the full height of the Opera House. Is this okay? In contrast, I saw this advert, 2021, a friend of mine and an artist, Mark Kaiser, put this up around the train station in Leamington. You may have seen it. It's refreshingly different from bank and fast fashion adverts. Then there's activism using advertising, led by donkeys on Brexit, you might know. And this is my take on marketing, which, I didn't have the balls to actually go and put that up, but maybe in the metaverse. Then there's beautifying space through art. Banksy, an idol of mine, brings visitors to places. Then the walls get ripped off and sold because they're so valuable and he's so clever. But we have it in Leamington too. Amazing works by the canal on my walk home. In Coventry, this is it. If it flies, it spies. Birds ain't real. It's part of a conspiracy over in the States. Here we got Fargo, which, sometimes it's a game of cat and mouse with the authorities. Other times it's a cat and it's a mouse. It's in Leamington. You probably know it. And here are some mock-ups of mine as part of a Brew God series about the toxic working culture at Brewdog. Cool Fox Teas, drumming studios, tattoo artists. We're living in Shoreditch, there it is, where I'll have an exhibition on Brick Lane in the spring. And to name check some really important local actors, Leamington Warwick's got a very vibrant art scene. Watched Open Studios is getting stronger and stronger. The very wonderful Art in the Park's coming up to its 10th anniversary in Jeffson Gardens this year. I'll be helping Kate Livingston, who's here, to organise it with her. Must give a mention also to Leamington Studio artists, to Maddie and Cassie, who've done a fantastic job with the LSA members in setting up this, which is in the old Cath Kitson. Instead of Sex and City handbags, we've now got a vibrant, glittering art scene thriving, and that's wonderful. And earlier on, the Pickle illustration, they kindly allowed me to use these from their Instagram. You can see those concrete blocks that were used to stop mass murder at Christmas, and they turned them into wonderful presents. So I think, when you think about what we can do with the streets, that's a really good example. Finally, could we not re-predestinize the parade? Was it not a massive misstep or missed opportunity when it was allowed to be cars again and buses? And when we look at the wealth of art within our community, is this not an opportunity to put education and nature and art and green spaces right in the middle of town that people could come to? Remember that. So that's my little journey into how I came to create art that makes you think, after humanitarian work, office work, identifying as an artist, coming through cancer, the pandemic, joining Watch Open Studios and Leamington Studio artists, and it's been a privilege to speak with you today. Thank you so much. You've been listening to Ben Talks. Thank you.
All three, I think that was incredible. You're all such a variety of creatives. I feel incredibly uncreative now. I feel like I need to go home and discover some hidden talent I haven't found in 40 years. But there's still time. This is about creativity against the odds. So let's talk about the odds. I think we probably could talk about money for ages, so we'll skip that, and we'll talk about what are the other barriers to creativity, internally, externally. What do you think?
I think it's sustaining yourself, in terms of keeping hold of that drive and trying to push forward. When you create something, I think the biggest factor is when you realise that when you're creating something or when you put something out, that nobody cares, right? And when you get your head around that, it becomes a lot easier because you're just doing it for yourself. And you're sustained by the work itself.
I care, by the way.
I think I can add to that. I can totally relate, but I think what was kind of clear, especially in your filmmaking as well, is that there's obviously a moment when it isn't just about you anymore, and actually you're galvanising a certain energy around your project, and it's other people coming together with you on that journey that then kind of forces it through and gets it to the end result. And it isn't something you can kind of do on your own. You know, it takes those different energies and that kind of collaboration and that support network that really makes a lot of this stuff happen.
How do you keep that creativity going? So when you come up against things, say a project isn't working or something, or a piece of art just isn't clicking, or you're not getting a response back, how do you actually just push through? How do you push through yourself through that?
I think especially with sculpture actually, and for me personally, it's very much about the process. So I kind of have an end goal in mind, but I'm quite open as to how I get there, and I'm also quite happy actually if I get to a crossroads and it goes somewhere else. So I think it's about not being too closed off about what kind of success is or what that end result is, and letting that journey, like, go with that journey, embrace that as part of the process, and let those changes kind of take you there. I mean, I know we're not talking about, I think, we could talk about money for ages, but the Hand Earth Gesture Return project, we delivered it on like a third of the initial budget. And I spent a lot of time, I think 2 months, I calculated 2 months of unpaid labour writing unsuccessful funding bids. You know, and at some point you have to say, I'm going to stop trying to get the money and focus on the project and work with what we've got. And then you've got to make compromises, and you've got to make kind of changes and kind of go with that. And and I think in a lot of ways it maybe was a better outcome because we didn't have the bells and whistles. We didn't, we didn't have all that money. I mean, I would have loved the money and the stress. My stress levels, my God. But, I think it's about being adaptable.
I think that's something in fairness, we had a great Zoom yesterday, which we could have just filmed and played today, because we chatted about this, but we were talking about how, actually, we said we weren't going to talk about money, but here we are, that money, having less budget, especially I'm guessing for filmmaking, actually pushes your creativity. Do you think that's a fair thing to say? Like, if you were given unlimited funds, you'd have kind of too many options.
Yeah, like I said, I work to my limitations, and I think that parameter, or that box that I put myself in, is very good. I can only move within those walls, so it does contain it, and it makes it a lot more manageable. Yeah.
Ben, you touched on having a support network. Behind every great artist, etc. It's your wife. So how important is a support network when you are trying to do something creative? What do you need from that network?
Yeah, it helps when you have a roof over your head, doesn't it? Yeah, I mean, I wanted to talk about partnership. You both work in a very participative, collaborative environment, and I think that's fantastic. And the thing that I struggle with is independent artists, and that was sort of shown in the Pink Floyd cover. And I want to celebrate kind of non-artists. There's been quite a few people up here who said, I don't do art. You said it yourself. Haven't you, Kate? When you're producing other people's work and stuff, and how vital it is to have people that that make things happen. Whether it was the LTB this morning over in Coventry that Alan was talking about. And I personally would really value, if there's anyone here, someone that can help sort of take to market, to get it out there, get art out there. And that requires partnership. And, I don't have any problem with the creative side in terms of ideas and stuff. But having enough time, having a roof over your head, and having a support network, that really, really helps to give you that space and that freedom to go ahead and be confident in producing art.
Cool. And then, you touched on how you measure success, or if it's even important to kind of measure success. I think a lot of creative people feel like it needs to, if you want to write a book, it needs to sell, it needs to be published to get that success. Do you do you try and measure success? Is it important, or is it the art itself?
Well, I've certainly learned to judge it on the art itself, the work itself. I mean, my books have got a small but growing readership, and I've had some wonderful reactions, and that is amazing. But I have to judge it on what it is I've created, I think, because I don't make much money at this, if anything. So it has to be, it just has to be on the work itself. I think that's how I measure the success.
Do you guys?
I'd just say briefly that I think it can be tested by how it makes people feel, that we understand the cost of everything, the value of nothing, that the value of art really is how it makes people feel. And what's lovely when I'm able to show my art to people at exhibitions and events, hopefully you can see there's some comedy in there. And when people are laughing and chuckling and I sell them something, they put it in Chuckle Corner and they have friends around for drinks and they chuckle at, the lockdown, my self-isolation was education, and they remember the tough times, but they remember them with some kind of positivity. So the value comes from bringing some happiness and some positive feelings to them, whether or not we buy them. If they laugh and then walk away, that's fine.
I think the other thing we said yesterday was, I was talking about my experiences of somebody like who's creative is that they feel like a better person. Like it's something, and I think you were kind of saying you almost need to vomit out the creativity. You need to get it out to get on with the rest of your life. Kind of like it's something you need to do. Yeah,
when I've written, I can sort of take on the world a lot better. It's a strange thing. Especially when I've finished a project, I feel amazing. That's when I can put up that shelf. I can get that done then, once I've done my work.
You can cut the grass.
Yeah, I can cut the grass then.
Did you have anything?
Yeah, no, I think I mean, it can be a bit like a drug, really. I think you do get that, that high after a kind of a successful project. Yeah, and then it's on to the next one. But I think you're right as well. It is about how it makes people feel. And I think a project like Hand Earth Just to Return, you start it off as a kind of core group, and you have this kind of idea, and you're putting it out into the world, and you think it's going to work, but you don't actually know until you're doing it. And the energy, and the joy that was down at the canal basin, I mean, we tried to encapsulate it in the film, but it was nothing compared to being there. I tell everyone, you had to be there, you had to be doing it. And to see how many people from the local flats, these are not art world people that got involved. They kind of watched from afar, they watched from the flat to start with, then they got a little bit closer the next day, then they were sitting on the bench, then they were kind of asking, like, what are you mad people doing in this heat out there? And then by the end of the week, they were part of the core team, and they were mixing clay and getting muddy and bringing friends and family down. And, we couldn't have hoped for better, but we didn't know it would work. So there is, I guess maybe that risk is exciting as well. It is a kind of buzz, and then you pull it off, and you think, yes, this has touched people. This is something special.
Yeah, and your videos and what we saw in terms of creating that art in the public space, it was beautiful, and it was like just a transfer of energy, really. So we talk about support networks and those that enable artists to do what they do, and then it's a transference. We then hopefully give something back, because we have to produce this art. We, get energized, and we give that energy back to people through the art that we do. But I think public art and collaborative art, and that's what Spark's about. Connect, collaborate, and then what we're doing today is that we are. Come back to Bear Grylls again. What connects us makes us stronger, and I think if we can do that through public art, that's fantastic, especially in the parade when it's pedestrianised.
We will. We'll just start walking down. It'll be fine. So this is kind of a last question from me, and then we'll head to the audience because I'm aware of time. Two-part question, because why not? What advice would you give to other creatives? And then we are surrounded by creatives in here who are all very inspiring. We're about connecting. Is there anyone you want to connect with? If anyone wants to connect with these guys, come find them afterwards. But yeah, so advice, and who do you want to connect with? Or not. I mean, they don't want to know anyone.
Shall I start?
I would just say join local groups like LSA, for example, and the LSA Art Room. Come and see us there. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I think you mentioned it in your talk, actually, but it's that idea of don't wait for permission. You know, if you want it, make it happen. If it doesn't exist, set it up. You know, don't wait to be more qualified. Don't think someone else should do it. You know, just get on with it, and you'll learn as you go. You know.
Yeah, you have to forge your own path. It's kind of the only way, and I certainly don't think there's any better time to be creating any kind of art form. I think there's so many platforms now, so many avenues, so many people that are willing to help and support you. You've got to find those people. It takes work, it takes discipline, but you have to just go and do it. And don't wait for anyone's permission.
I'm just going to steal your line, which is outrun the doubt.
Outrun the doubt.
Which I think just sums it up,
Yeah.
which is lovely. Somebody's going to have to throw this cube. Is there any questions? I can't see you. So even if... Oh, there you are. Has anyone got any questions?
Everyone.
Oh, good. Ben's going to throw. I can sit down.
Wow, that's...
There we go. I'm glad I'm not throwing
Don't
it.
knock that camera that's...
Oh, there we go.
Oh.
Whoa. I've got one more throw. Oh, there we go. Let's take out the light.
This is really good entertainment.
This is good.
I just wanted to hold the cube. No, Lucy, I wondered, is it harder to get funding for something which is temporary? Because a lot of outcomes, we were always expecting something quite physical. So I wondered what the response was for you.
I think it's always hard to get funding. I think it's hard. It's hard. Though, you know, I don't think it's any harder to get funding for something temporary necessarily. I think actually that can work in your favour. I mean, if you think about trying to get a permanent commission installed in Leamington or something temporary, the amount of opinions and, you know, people for it and against it for something permanent could, you know, you could be like tied up in knots for years. Whereas at least if people know it's going up and it's going away again, you know, you can kind of get it through further. I think it's maybe difficult when you're trying to do something new or challenging or different that's potentially harder to articulate or harder to distill into a neat paragraph that goes into a funding application that's kind of more nuanced. But hopefully, you know, now we've done this one project, and it was the biggest project that Pangaea has done, public art programme of our own. We've got that evidence now of the film that we can kind of show to other funders. So I hope that will make it easier in the future. But it's an incredibly tough funding landscape right now, and it's only going to get tougher.
That was a nice positive note to end on.
Sorry. Well, it's true. I think we
Just
have to be. I
outrun the
think we have to
doubt.
be realistic
And
up
yes.
here, and we can say there's loads of great support out there, and we can say all of these great things, but actually,
It's hard.
it is also hard, and it takes a lot of work, and there is a lot of rejection. And you know, I did waste 2 months of my life writing funding applications that were unsuccessful. It is
Does that
it's not.
stall you when the rejection? Does it just stop the drive, or do you push through it?
I think you have to push through it because you've kind of you've told everyone it's happening. You
that's
can't
the
actually
secret.
apply for anything until
well,
you basically built
absolutely.
the project.
Yeah, I'm a
you
firm
know.
believer in that, of saying something, like announcing I'm going to do something, and then, well, I've got to go and do it then. Because I've backed myself into a corner.
Yeah.
I think that's a good way of, tricking your mind.
Yeah.
Is there another question? I saw the cube go. Hello.
Hello. There are quite a few students here, and even people who are older and trying different creative practices. What advice do you have for people just starting out on their creative or artistic journey?
Start small and finish everything you start. Because if you finish a small project, it will push you on to the next stage. I did that. Let's go and do the next thing then, and just start building slowly, whatever it is you're doing. But yeah, start small and finish it. That's the biggest thing.
Yeah, watch out for all the fringe activities. A creative creates, an artist makes art, a writer writes, and it's very easy just to do, I don't know, social media and all this kind of stuff, planning. Make sure that, in your week's plan, you've got art time and you schedule that in. And switch off all devices when you're doing it.
Shock horror. Sorry, I just couldn't be away from my phone. I just can't do it. Is there another question? I can see the cue being gently passed back. That's very kind.
Hello.
Hello.
I thoroughly enjoyed this. Thank you guys so much. I had a question. I love hearing about people's creative processes. Is there anything that you do in particular? Sometimes people say, I get inspiration for everything, but I'd love to hear if there's any sort of rituals or just general places that you go to draw inspiration from.
I like the sound of rituals. That sounds kind of witchy or something.
I run, actually. I think it's kind of switching off. If I've got a block or I'm stressed or, trying to figure something out, the best thing to do is to not think about it and to get out into the open air. And running for me is great, but it could be just go look at art in London for a weekend or go for a walk in the countryside. I think to kind of not think about something actually is a really good time when things start to kind of coalesce in your mind.
Getting off devices then.
Yeah,
I'm a big fan of idling. So idling is like the French say le flâneur, and it's someone who just sort of wanders around. You can be on horseback, you could be cycling, you could be running, you could be walking, mindful walking, all that sort of stuff. I mean, when you have writer's block and you're looking at a blank page, you go for a walk, you've come back, you sort out the problem. Also, that can happen at night. If you want to think about something before you go to sleep, your subconscious will sort it out. And I often find first thing in the morning is when, you get into this what's called an alpha state, and you just start, and then you perhaps write stuff down before you lose it in your head.
I find that music really helps me, particularly if I'm sitting down to write and nothing's coming. I play a lot of film soundtracks, and it sort of allows me to get in the zone. I think all that is good, though, getting out, walking and thinking. I think any creative has to have time on their own just to sit and think. And it's an important part of the process. I like spending a lot of time on my own, and it's important. But actually sitting down and actually writing, it's music that does it for me.
I need some time on my own. That's clearly it. I'm going to book myself a holiday. Any more questions without the kids? Any more questions? I can't see any. So I just want to say thank you to these three. Please have a round of applause for them. Lovely, lovely coaches. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming.